Comrades, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Ramer, pronouns he, they, and I'm a member of the Research and Political Education team here at the Black Alliance for Peace, also known as BAP. So this webinar is part of the Black Power webinar series organized by the Research and Political Education team. And so before we get started, I'll just give a little bit of background information on what the Black Alliance for Peace is. So the Black Alliance for Peace seeks to recapture and redevelop the historic anti-war, anti-imperialist, and pro-peace positions of the radical Black movement. Through educational activities, organizing, and movement support, organizations and individuals in the Alliance work to oppose both militarized domestic state repression and the policies of destabilization, subversion, and the permanent war agenda of the US state globally. Introduce our host for this evening, Kamau Franklin. Kamau Franklin is the founder of Community Movement Builders, a grassroots organization dedicated to creating sustainable Black communities through organizing and cooperative development. Kamau has been a dedicated community organizer for over 25 years, first in New York City and now based in the South. He has worked on various issues, including youth organizing and development, police misconduct, community cop watch programs, freedom school programs for youth, electoral and policy campaigns, large-scale community gardens, and alternatives to incarceration programs. I'll just hand it over to our host, Kamau Franklin. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for that. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate BAP trusting me somewhat with the hosting duties for this important seminar, this important webinar, to talk about Black August and ongoing campaigns to free political prisoners. One of the things that I think is important when we talk about Black August and why it's important for us to continue to commemorate and act on Black August, one is that this may be the last or left, I'm not going to call it a holiday, but it may be the last kind of commemoration activity that we as Black radicals still truly control and own. So much of our history has been taken from us. So much of the things that we celebrate, that we honor, has been mainstreamed from us, have been made official holidays by the state. And we know once that happens that it will be, all the radicalness will be taken out of it. All the issues and questions around self-determination that helped start these things will be taken out of it. Black August is a month in which we get to commemorate political prisoners, political exiles, where we get to talk about the history of Black movement, where we get to study those who came before us, and we get to learn the knowledge of people like George Jackson, the philosophers and the organizer that he was, and all the folks who came around him. So it's very, very important that we continue to understand that Black August is a centerpiece of the organizing that we should be doing, and a way in which we should be remembering our history and following the struggle of those who came before us. So without further ado, I want to introduce a clip that we did about a year ago for last year's Black August through the Black Power media station, in which we give some history in detail about what Black August is, how it came about, and why it is that we need to continue again to commemorate and honor the heroes and sheroes of our movement.
What's up, world? Welcome to this very special Black Power Media commemoration of Black August. My name is Jared Ball, and we are joined by a bunch of our regular hosts at the channel. And to my left, starting with Dr. Layla Brown, Dr. CBS, Dr. Iyeli Ichile, Kalanji Jamachanga, Kamau Franklin over there at the end. And we are going to have a robust discussion about the history and importance and continued relevance of Black August. Kalanji, why don't you get us started?
Yes, so we're here to clear the air on Black August because of the fact that, it's real cool that folks have been commemorating and trying to get an understanding of what Black August is. So we wanted to kind of make it simple and plain. First and foremost, Black August is not a celebration, it's a commemoration. We're commemorating fallen freedom fighters who were in the then 33 prisons in California. Many of them were tortured, many of them were disappeared, literally, and murdered, outright murdered. Oftentimes when you hear about Black August, you hear about Jonathan and George Jackson were definitely integral parts in Black August, but also we wanted to kind of break down what it is. It is a time for fasting, it is a time for exercise, it's a time for discipline, and it's a time to, most importantly, remember our political prisoners. A lot of people talk about reparations, but if you're going to talk about reparations without first talking about our political prisoners, then you're doing yourself a disservice. You're just thinking that you're thinking. I want to start off by talking about the fact that Black August commemoration has been in existence for 42 years. It started in 1979, 1 year after the death of Qatari Golden. Qatari Golden was a brother who was one of the soldiers for George Jackson. He had the discipline, he taught the bastardized style of martial arts that was developed by George Jackson, and he was a stand-up brother. He was playing football on the yard of San Quentin, and while he was out there, he ended up hitting his head on the side of a pipe that was sticking out of the brick wall, and he was denied medical treatment, medical neglect. So they knew that he was a serious leader, so it was their opportunity to allow him to literally die of torture and pain. They held him for about 8 to 9 hours inside the prison infirmary when they knew they couldn't do anything for him. They transported him to another hospital. At that hospital, they had him sit around for a few more hours. Then they decided they couldn't do anything for him, and they took him to this last hospital where he made his transition. Qatari Golden was a charismatic leader, and he was definitely looked at as such, by his comrades and fellow quote-unquote inmates. So in 1979, a number of different folks who was known as the Black August Organizing Committee started Black August outside of the gates of San Quentin. For several years, I served as the East Coast coordinator for the original Black August Organizing Committee, which I was honored. But Black August started in 1970, and it started when W.L. Nolan, Alvin Jugs Miller, and Cleveland Edwards were shot and murdered on a yard at Soledad State Prison. They got into a fight with some Aryans, and one of the prison guards, Opie Miller, opened fire and shot these three brothers in the yard, and made all the other prisoners go back into the cell. I mean, not even the cells, into the building. And many of them came out to try to help them. And when they made efforts and attempts to step out to assist them, guns were pulled on them, and they were threatened with death as well. So they literally bled out on the yard. W.L. Nolan was a comrade of George Jackson. George Jackson and W.L. Nolan, it was said, alleged that they started what was known as the Black Guerrilla Family, which started out as a freedom fighting organization. Like many street organizations, they start off with good intent, and the state puts its fangs and paws into it, and it becomes something else. Okay, so 4 days after that situation, a prison guard was beaten and thrown from the top tier. George Jackson, Fleeta Drumgold, and John Clochette were charged with that murder, and they were known as the Soledad brothers. Okay, shortly after the murders and arrests of the Soledad brothers, George Jackson released his first book, which was Soledad Brothers Prison Letters from George Jackson. Okay, so moving on along from that, George was quickly thrust into the international spotlight. He became the field marshal for the Black Panther Party. Minister U.A.P. Newton drafted him as field marshal for the Black Panther Party, and he agreed. I want to point out that George Jackson, he entered the prison system not as a quote-unquote political prisoner, but as a social prisoner. He was accused of robbing a gas station for $70, and he was sentenced to from 1 to, I believe, 70 years for robbing a gas station at $70 at the age of 18. So moving along, on August 7th, 1970, his brother, Jonathan Jackson, entered the Marin County Courthouse with intention of freeing the Soledad brothers. He came in with some arms, including M1 carbine, and he said, "Gentlemen, we'll be taking over from here." So he passed that gun to James McClain, who was already facing trial for stabbing a prison guard, William Christmas, and Rochelle McGee. So they took the judge, they took the DA, a court reporter, and another individual, and they put them in the van. They take them away. The prison guards were told do not fire on the van because they knew that these folks were in there, and instead they opened fire, and consequently, everyone in the van was murdered, from Jonathan Jackson, to the other brothers, James McClain, Rochelle McGee, the judge, Judge Haley, and I believe the DA was wounded. Funny enough, the DA actually was one of the folks who ended up dying later on when he was on, what's the white boy's name that had the coat? Jim Jones. He ended up following Jim Jones at some point. But
He didn't die.
yeah, he didn't die. So basically, after that situation, Rochelle McGee was the only survivor. Rochelle McGee and that guy from the DA. So moving from there, that was August 7th, 1970. 1 year later, August 21st, 1971, George Jackson was coming from a prison visit. A visit with his attorney, and he was shot and killed by a prison guard. They claimed that he was trying to smuggle a pistol under his afro wig. Okay, of course he didn't have an afro wig, nor was he trying to smuggle a pistol, but they had to assassinate him because of the fact that George Jackson was the focal motor. He was the focal motor of the movement. He was a serious organizer, freedom fighter, someone who taught himself his own style of, a bastardized style of martial arts. He learned and studied different revolutionary tenets and tactics. He became a communist, and he taught others, inspired others. In fact, that was one of the cases that Angela Davis had, was because of the fact that they said that she supplied Jonathan with the guns that he went into the courtroom with. So he was murdered by prison guards, and a few days later, the prison erupted, and I believe it was 3 prison guards were murdered, and the folks who they accused was known as the San Quentin Six. After that situation, about 2.5 weeks later, brothers in Attica, New York, Attica State Prison, decided that this is some bullshit and we're gonna take over. So they held down Attica State Prison for another 4 days. So those are like the beginnings of Black August. And then, like I said, you fast forward to the situation with Qatari Golden, who was a student of George Jackson. And that's the basic, just a quick little thing on what Black August was. Again, Black August is about political prisoners. We've heard different things, folks talk about, it's Garvey's birthday, and this happened during that month, and that's a beautiful thing. We acknowledge it because they are our ancestors, our OGs, so on and so forth, but Black August is strictly about political prisoners. So, hopefully you have a nice basic understanding.
Right on. Thank you for that.
Hey, that was great. That was a basic overview of the history of Black August. Next we have coming up is Tone. Tone is going to talk to us about contemporary political prisoners, something that we don't hear a lot about, unfortunately. As we know, we have political prisoners from various generations of struggle who are still locked down behind the wall. To start off with, let me read a little bio for Tone. Tone is a strategic organizer who works locally, nationally, and internationally. She is an adjunct professor of managerial accounting and spends much of her time constructing data models, reading, gardening, and tutoring kids in STEM. Tone is a Malcolmite. So am I, Tone. So am I, who serves as a justice advocate. Without further ado, let's have Tone come up to talk to us a little bit about contemporary political prisoners.
Yes, thank you, Brother Kamau, and peace, everyone. I want to say first and foremost, revolutionary greetings and happy Black August to the freedom fighters. As described, I have been asked to speak on a number of issues, and I hope to do so. First, to understand who has become a political prisoner, I think it's helpful to understand what a political prisoner is. Political prisoners, or PPs, can be defined as people jailed on charges related to their resistance, resistance to oppression and repression, and targeted by the state for their revolutionary political beliefs and or actions. For example, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, Kamau Siddiqui, Dr. Mutulu Shakur, or Veronza Bowers. They can also be people who, while incarcerated, experienced ideological shifts and were kept incarcerated due to their revolutionary political beliefs and or actions. For example, George Jackson, as described earlier. The contribution their resistance makes to revolution is the basis of their capture or prolonged sentence, regardless of the charges brought. POWs, or prisoners of war, in our movement can be defined as those who additionally took up armed struggle. Regardless of the length of time in state custody, jail, or prison, anyone who meets this criteria can be considered a PP, political prisoner, or a POW, prisoner of war, within our movements. For example, Joshua Williams of Ferguson, Missouri, and Dawn Jeffrey of Little Rock, Arkansas, are political prisoners currently incarcerated for fighting for their sanity and freedom, and are fighting for their sanity and freedom. Many people who participated in racial justice uprisings since Ferguson have since been incarcerated and are fighting charges. Many have mysteriously been found dead or, quote, committed suicide, unquote, right here on US soil. Allow me to read the following. DeAndre Joshua's body was found inside a burned car blocks from a protest. The 20-year-old was found shot in the head before the car was torched. He and Sean Gray were murdered after testifying in Ferguson. Darren Seals, shown on video comforting Mike Brown's mother that same night, met an almost identical fate 2 years later. The 29-year-old's bullet-riddled body was found in a burning car on September 2016. Marshawn McCorrell of Columbus, Ohio, supposedly shot himself in February 2016 outside of the front door of the Ohio State House. Edward Crawford Jr., 27, supposedly fatally shot himself in May of 2017. 24-year-old Deion Jones was found hanging from a tree in the yard of his North St. Louis County home in October 2019. And Basim Mizari, a 31-year-old Palestinian American, frequently live-streamed videos of the Ferguson demonstration, was found unresponsive on a bus in November 2019. These mysterious deaths targeting individuals considered or are considered close cases by the state, but they still haunt us. As mentioned, Joshua Williams of Ferguson and Dawn Jeffrey of Little Rock are two examples of millennials who have become political prisoners since the Ferguson uprising. Many others, though, have been arrested, some jailed, and have since been released, like D'Angelo Sandage in Gary, Indiana, Corsica Campbell, Jacksonville, Florida, Sally Thomas, Patterson, New Jersey, and we're familiar with our comrade Dedan Wukari of Greenville, North Carolina. These are just some of the names of those who encountered police after their participation in activism. In many cases, this was their first time facing charges, yet this did not protect them with the same level of optimism and perceived innocence afforded to others. Many activists subsequently have been targeted and experienced diverse forms of repression, possibly in a more nuanced, technologically advanced way than was experienced of those in the Black Power movements of the 60s and 70s, or the rebellions of those who have been formerly enslaved. Perhaps the concept of political prisoners have morphed and evolved with the times. When we read such texts as the COINTELPRO papers, documents from the FBI's secret war against dissent in the United States by Ward Churchill and Jim Vander, we gather that there is a concerted effort to erase those who present as a threat, as opposed to martyr them. This also comes with, quote, preventing the rise of a Black Messiah, unquote, casting dispersions and confusion to dismantle organizing efforts, discredit and sow discord. This resulted in long state and federal prison sentences, targeting and even death. Today, many participants in what may be considered the radical justice uprising didn't step into the work in the same way many of our elders once did. Many of these individuals today are somewhat unknown, and not always associated with organizing. There's also a number of activists that are not only known to law enforcement, but are followed, harassed, intimidated, and on lists, etc. Regardless of how you come into the work or in the limelight, the nuance of repression may still apply. In the case of D'Angelo and Corsica, these individuals were arrested and released, but their records, the records they received for participating in the protest, will continue to live with them and disrupt their chances to secure gainful employment or promotion or access opportunities that require background checks. There are an unnamed number of individuals who experience probation, court dates, fines and fees, parole, ongoing surveillance, loss of employment, housing insecurity, harassment, doxing, swatting, white supremacist group targeting, and more. The original charges are always looming. This is how state repression has evolved to continue impacting the lives of these individuals, and even though they may not be kept in prison or jail for long extended periods of time. Many are poor, feel isolated, and are battling mental health issues. Also important to note is that the internet and social media have changed the way we campaign on behalf of political prisoners, but only those who have strong community or influential backing receive the full exposure that is now available. When political prisoners have a community to support them, they can have landing pages erected on their behalf, crowdfunding campaigns, social media awareness campaigns, adequate legal aid requests filled, justice organizations to fight on their behalf, such as the Southern Center for Human Rights, the Equal Justice Initiative, or the ACLU, as well as hashtags. We live in a media-driven world, which shapes public opinion. This has a real impact in the courtroom. The more control you have over your exposure as a political prisoner, the more opportunities you have for someone to fight for your liberation, which is why it is important for organizers to work together and look out for the cases to help identify loopholes, trends, and opportunities for liberation. Liberation requires more than social media and exposure. For example, we need dedicated organizers, competent counsel, and loads of resources. But for many contemporary political prisoners, the internet is how they express their voice. And at times, it's the only thing they have within their control. The advent of crowdfunding platforms like GoFundMe or petitions like change.org should not be discounted. Someone's live or hashtag today can be a viral moment tomorrow. Whereas there was little to no redress for being vilified by the media in the past, a la hashtag the exonerated five, contemporarily, because of the ways in which we use the internet, many have a louder voice or more control over your narrative. In the case of those who are already on the inside and have received long sentences due to their political ideology and action, it may be more challenging for you to get the word out. They have fewer resources, but some good ones exist, like jailhouse lawyers. By no means are these guaranteed exit strategies. Also, folks on the inside can be targeted by the actions of those on the outside. We still need to engage in the work intelligently and change the culture of weaponizing the carceral state against political prisoners. Also, first, you should start where you are. In your own area, there is very likely to be a group of organizers or an organization that is advocating or organizing on the behalf of existing political prisoners from or near your community. Building on-the-ground support is essential. Remember that these are human beings locked away from society. Learn their names, their stories, their condition, where they're being held, with whom they're being held in custody, the parties responsible for their capture, their projected release date. Learn who stands to gain from their incarceration. It's often political. The party applying legal pressure to control the narrative around their case. The narratives used to keep them incarcerated in the court of public opinion. Their family needs, their affiliation. You should also be aware and study the laws in their jurisdiction, the local leaders and politicians. The more you expose yourself to the work, the more you'll know. Oftentimes, the news or mass media outlets will not be speaking to their cases in full. So you can't really rely just on that. Social media is another way people are spreading the word about political prisoners. Seek out organizations and organizers and information channels that make it a point to try to make alternative information accessible. BLM Boston's newsletter, is one such outlet. The Black Agenda Report is another. Erasure is a big part of deprioritizing their cases. Make it plain and share the messaging organizers have strategically put together in their defense with your friends and family. Put the information in your school's newspapers. Talk about your social groups from your own voice. So speak about it within your social groups. You can even tell your local politicians that these are some of the issues you care about. And of course, join the existing campaigns to free them. There are a number of ongoing cases that require your help and skills. Getting involved with these organizations and lending your support directly to the organizers is another way to participate. Learn how to organize is another way to empower yourself and join the movement. You can study the Black radical peace traditions and strategies. Attend organizing workshops like the ones through BOLD, Organizing for Leadership and Dignity, or seek the tutelage of an elder. You can learn concepts, broaden your comprehension, read more books and articles like the Freedom Archive, the Huey P. Newton Reader, We Are Our Own Liberator by Jalil Muntaqim, and also in anticipation for 2023, The New Bones, Abolitionism and the Captive Maternal by Dr. Joy James. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention Blood in My Eyes by George Jackson. Piece the history together. Studying and deep diving with the scholarship is key. Lastly, if no campaigns exist for these political prisoners, reach out to the political prisoner or POW in question and find out if they want us to establish one. A local effort in tandem with aligned efforts only increase the opportunities for success. In terms of how maybe gender and sexuality transform how we think about what it means to be a political prisoner, I think that as a womanist, a lot of these spaces are overwhelmingly cisgendered heterosexual spaces. Though I believe many of them try to keep their politics in command, when there is disagreement or conflict, the sentiment at times can become gendered or patriarchal. When we think of political prisoners, we don't immediately think of women. Reverend Joy Powell, for example, was not part of the Black Power movement of the 60s and 70s, but she's absolutely a political prisoner. Janet and Janine Africa, regardless of how you feel about Move 9, were political prisoners. Another point to think about is how the carceral system engages Black women radicals, where some of them never make it past police custody, as we saw in the case with Sandra Bland. We want to humanize more people. This should be done while telling the truth and contending with contradictions, whether it's hard or not. In terms of what organizations have been doing locally to support the effort to free political prisoners, there have been a number of campaigns on their behalf. These campaigns do the work of raising awareness, raising funds, merging campaigns, pushing propaganda, engaging in direct action, organizing legal and medical support, researching, uniting efforts with others, similarly aligned organizations, and weaving together issues surrounding elder abuse and medical neglect so that the case can be made to not only grant political prisoners human rights and basic needs, but also freedom. People power through on-the-ground support is very important. Where there is people power, there is also the capacity to apply political pressure, to recruit volunteers and other organizers, and develop strategies that will ultimately result in their cases either getting more notoriety, which can be helpful, or get more direct support from them on the inside or to their families. More can absolutely be done, and it requires your dedication and skills. So in closing, I would like to remind us to get organized, support Black August efforts. We welcome everyone to come to Boston for our second annual Boston Curve Fest, where we also commemorate political prisoners. There is space for every principled person in the movement. Get involved to free political prisoners. All power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Tone. We really appreciate it. Folks can also go to Jericho, the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement homepages to find out more about political prisoners there also. But as we continue on talking about a lot of the political prisoners that are hidden away from us because they weren't, as was said, they weren't necessarily involved in the Black Power movement, we're going to switch now to a conversation on the Pendleton 2. And we're going to bring up Brother Two Black. I'm going to give a little bio for Two Black, and he's going to start off by reading a short piece from an article about the Pendleton 2. Then we're going to do a 5-minute clip. But first, Brother Two Black is a poet, host of the Black Myth podcast, member of Black Alliance for Peace, and communications coordinator for the Defense Committee to Free the Pendleton 2. He is based in Indianapolis, Indiana, and can be reached at 2black8808 at gmail.com. And that's 2black with 2 T-O-O, BLACK 8808 at gmail.com, or 2black on Twitter. I always retweet his stuff. Let me just let y'all know that. So, Brother Two Black, why don't you read that statement you got prepared for us?
All right, first of all, thanks for having me. Peace to everybody. So yeah, we're talking here about the Pendleton 2. This is a case we're about to go over here in Indiana. So I'm going to read an article that was published by our defense committee and the Indianapolis Recorder. That's the black newspaper essentially in Indianapolis. Then we're going to share a clip, and then we're going to have a discussion. So on February 1st, 1985, a Ku Klux Klan splinter gang of prison guards named the Sons of Light sparked a prison rebellion at the Indiana Reformatory, what is now known as the Pendleton Correctional Facility, when they brutally beat a defenseless prisoner named Lincoln Love, a.k.a. Lokmar Abdul Wadood. Lokmar was admired and well-respected jailhouse lawyer. Prior to the incident, Lokmar, in tandem with other inmates in his unit, was making demands against the unsanitary conditions of the prison, including the denial of cleaning supplies. What occurred next was retaliation of such demands. According to a lawsuit filed at the time, the Sons of Light, armed with illegal billy clubs, mace, and tear gas, quote, maliciously held him, Lokmar, down and unmercifully stomped and kicked the inmate all over his body, and he hit the inmate upon and about his upper body and head with nightsticks, end quote. As Lokmar was dragged face down out of his cell, his fellow prisoners called for the assistance of John Balagoon Cole and Christopher Naeem Trotter, who are known as the Pendleton 2, and they led a politicized group of fellow inmates called the Black Dragons. I want to stop here to say there's a few other things. The order was to kill them. So this is why they rushed to his defense. At this point, Lokmar was being beaten unconscious inside the captain's office. The order from the guard was to, quote, kill the son of a bitch, end quote. In an attempt to save Lokmar's life, the concerned prisoners peacefully demanded to see Lokmar, but predictably the Sons of Light did not respond kindly to this demand either. As the Black Dragons attempted to push past the guards, a melee broke out. Armed with mace, billy clubs, hammers, and a shotgun, the Sons of Light began attacking the prisoners. As a result, the Black Dragons were forced to fend for their own lives. So they ran to the infirmary looking for Lokmar, learning he was not in the captain's office. The Sons of Light tried to corner the Black Dragons in the infirmary. To escape their inevitable death, they took several guards hostage at knife point as they rushed to occupy Cell House J. By putting the attention on themselves, they had successfully saved Lokmar's life and other prisoners in the infirmary who the white supremacist guards had told were next in line for the same fate as Lokmar. Once in the cell house, Indiana State Police, Indiana Department of Corrections, administrators, National Guard, and media arrived at the prison. Ultimately, all lives were spared. Prisoners issued a series of demands for humane conditions and respect. Inmates demanded that, quote, the prison establish a grievance committee, set minimum wages for inmates, allow prisoners to be politically active without intimidation or reprisals, and end censorship of all letters, magazines, and newspapers, end quote. The rebellion ended peacefully after negotiations, but the persecution did not. During the trial, the leaders of the rebellion, Balagoon and Naeem, faced an all-white jury in Madison County who the prosecution and judge openly fraternized with. The Indiana Reformatory Guard, Michael Richardson, who eventually exposed the Sons of Light in his own deposition, was questioned by the defense about them and the violent prison, but the judge would not allow for any questions on these matters to go forward, thereby granting every objection to the prosecution. So they also denied any evidence admitted into the court that Lincoln Love was beat, or they said that it was irrelevant to the case because they tried to advocate for a self-defense case. Consequently, Balagoon and Naeem were sentenced to 84 and 142 years in prison. Since their conviction, Balagoon and Naeem illegally spent 32 and 20 years in solitary confinement, respectively. At the time of the rebellion, Balagoon only had 3.5 years left on his original sentence, while Naeem had even less, with only 3 months remaining. Nevertheless, they sacrificed their life to save a human life. They sacrificed their freedom to save a human life. As a result, they are now the Pendleton 2, political prisoners punished only for the day, not only for the day of the rebellion, but marked as examples of what happens to prisoners when they actively resist against the state's racist violence. The Pendleton 2 need our help. Both gentlemen are now senior citizens with deteriorating health in the prison system, rampant with medical neglect. Lokmar, the fellow inmate who they saved, actually passed from COVID in 2020. And that was like most prisoners who died from COVID due to medical neglect as well. The state of Indiana has blocked nearly every avenue for them to receive a fair trial. So please sign the letters that we're going to put in the chat. We're looking for everyone to sign to the governor and the prosecutor. And if you want to become any further involved, we'll have those links. We'll have those links in the chat as well. So next, we're going to play the clip from the documentary of someone who's going to be on the panel with me, Justin, as we call him, Jock, from the documentary Freedom Pendleton 2, They Stood Up.
In there.
Yeah, we stayed down there for I know 3.5 years, but they were there. They stayed in segregation longer. As far as I know, it's still in segregation. You know.
You guys, especially Cole and Trotter, all you guys were trying to make the conditions in the prison just better, just to live without brutality.
That's all, man. Come on, man. We know we in prison, man. We ain't no model system, but we human, man. We human.
And every move y'all made trying to accomplish this, you knew that death could be right around the corner at any minute.
In some ways, segregate you, and once they segregate you, that's when they able to, come up in there and do what they want to you. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Those guys was willing to sacrifice, willing to risk their lives.
Yeah.
To try and save other people's lives.
But check it out, and that's the thing about it, man. I look back at it now. We were young, but you don't have no choice but to try to do something to do. You want to stay alive. Okay, I'm a prisoner, and I'm in prison, but you want to stay alive.
Well, on that particular day, I was 3.5 years from being paroled, right?
Yes.
But I'm not thinking about that. All I'm thinking about is being a brother to a brother, right?
Yes.
If I would allow them to murder this brother and I did nothing, I wouldn't have been able to look myself in the mirror, bro.
Yes.
Ain't no way I can hold my head up, you know what I'm saying, look myself in the mirror if I let them murder my brother. How can I say I love you and I let them murder you, right? And I was there to stop it. That's how my mind.
Y'all wasn't asked to be released or to send a helicopter. Nothing. Y'all was asking, stop brutalizing us.
Right.
Stop hurting all people who look like us. Let's have better relations.
Right.
So y'all was young men asking for this, and you saw the outcome of it, and you was right there from the beginning. Knowing everything you know now, being a wiser, older man, what would you want to say to John Cole and Chris Trotter if they were sitting right here in this room with us today?
Oh, man, what I would say is what I wanted to always say, thank you, brothers. I mean, thank you for standing up for me. You stood up for other people, but you made a sacrifice that, man, I couldn't make. I didn't make it that time, but, it was, it was spontaneous, but it was sincere. It was dependent not only on themselves, but other people, dependent on us, and, man, I thank them. I can't even comprehend the sacrifice that they made, or, I hug them. I would hug them, man, Yeah, I'm getting kind of emotional about that. That's some heavy stuff, man. You know. Yeah. But yeah, what they did back then, I mean, it's indescribable when you think back at it. You're like, damn, man. They stood all the way up, man. They stood all the way up. You know, we all played kind of roles that day, but man, they made the ultimate because they went in there and hey, where's Lokmar? You know, where's he at? It was like, hey, stop. I got to stop doing this right now to him and the rest of us, you know. And that's the thing I look back, man, you know, we were all kind of progressive to be that age. But it came out of that struggle of survival. We don't want to hurt nobody. Put the guards in a safe place. You know what I mean? But we want to put this on paper. Hey, we want to stop this, stop this. You sign it. Okay, we need somebody from the governor's office sign. We need the FBI. You know, we're kind of naive at the time, but this is what only avenue we knew, you know, to try to, stop this, you know.
All right, it's deep. So we're going to get into a further discussion about the Pendleton 2. We have two Black and we have two other members of the Defense Committee here. And so let me quickly read their bios off, and then we'll bring them on the screen. So first we have born in Gary, Indiana, residing in Evansville, is Queen Lewis. Has always been active in the community. As of 2021, her first son had been incarcerated for about 4 years, her second son for about 3 years, and her younger son had been gone for a little over 2 years. After going through cycles of depression, anxiety, anger, and hopelessness, Queen was introduced to the IDOC Watch and Focus initiatives as a group of people that could be a support group on the outside while her sons were locked up. She says that this introduction has educated and supported her in solid ways that helped her through particular struggles as a direct reaction to her loved ones being incarcerated. Queen is passionate about the vision for the reentry program as she realized through firsthand experiences the need for safe, resourceful housing and an opportunity to work in a capacity that can be a resource to the community. Thank you, Queen, for joining us. Next is Jack Huerta, grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana until his adolescent years, and then as a teenager who was thrown between the slums of Tijuana, Mexico and Gary, Indiana. Difficult conditions in a stressful environment made it easy to fall into the common traps of an urban community. He made his living as a drug dealer for over 25 years. After approximately 14 years of incarceration off and on in facilities across the country, and 2 years removed from being incarcerated, Mr. Huerta joined Focus Initiatives and served as a house manager. He also works as a warehouse team lead and is focusing on his passion, a cartoon project on YouTube called The Real Cindy Lou. He recently completed a documentary that we just saw a piece of called The Pendleton 2, They Stood Up. So I want to thank all of y'all for joining us. Really appreciate having you so we can dig a little deeper into the story. One of the first things we want to talk about is how the Defense Committee was formed and what are the objectives, particularly considering the years of time that these folks have been sentenced to. What do you feel are the objectives for the Defense Committee at this particular time? And anybody can jump in.
So can you repeat that question? I think you asked like 2 questions.
Well, 2 in 1. I asked you,
Okay.
how was the Defense Committee formed? So what led to the committee being formed? And the obviously follow-up is, what are the objectives of the Defense Committee since it's been formed? And within it, I threw in there, knowing that what the sentences are and what the time is that these brothers have spent locked up. What do you realistically think that you can get accomplished at this stage in terms of having objectives for their defense?
Okay. We all have our own probably story for this because we entered the committee at different points. So I think everyone should answer that, but I'll answer first. For me, I went to a rally, it was a Prison Lives Matter rally back at the end of 2021 downtown Indianapolis. And I was talking with Nick, who's part of IDOC Watch, which is not IDOC. That always gets confused. IDOC Watch is a group that watches the Indiana Department of Corrections to try to tame them as much as possible, as well as give support to people coming home and people inside. And they were telling me that there were political prisoners in Indiana, and I was honestly consider myself ashamed because I am a part of this network. Many of you know me. I know about a lot of the political prisoners, the ones that are more famous. And I did not know that there were political prisoners in Indiana. Honestly, I don't even know if it had ever crossed my mind to be straight up. So as soon as I heard about that, I wanted to know more. So he sent me information. We did an interview with both Balagoon and Naeem, as well as Shaka Shakur on the Black Myths podcast. The myth was that violence is never the answer. And as we see in this story, if they had not defended Lokmar, they would have killed Lokmar and probably would have at least hurt or killed other inmates as well. But by rising up, as Jock points out in the documentary, like it takes the attention off of them. So from there, there was already, I'm sure, internal discussions within the IDOC watch, and I was approached, and we started the defense committee, and then we began holding events and working towards a Black August week, which we just completed last week. So we did 3 events. We did one on medical neglect because actually one of the Pendleton 2 Balagoon had suffered a seizure not too long ago during the summer, and we had to do a phone zap. And this is the kind of stuff that when you're really trying to help and organize, you have to just advocate for people inside prison. Like, I know we're trying to get them out, but while they're in there, you have to advocate. So we had to do a phone zap, which is where you just call and demand that information be released because they weren't releasing that information to their families. So medical neglect is one of the issues. We did one overall on Black August, just a general breakdown, as well as tying it into this case. And then we did an event just this past Saturday, the premiering the documentary, They Stood Up. So our objectives right now, I mean, like we've been putting in the chat, is obviously where there's a legal side to things. We're trying to try any loophole, as Tone talked about earlier, but really just trying to raise awareness because most people don't know that this even occurred. There's other issues to get to, as we'll get in other questions as far as like how to raise awareness about the case, but still politicize people around the prison industrial complex in general. But we can get to more of that later. But that's our general objectives.
Let me switch to Jock real quick and ask you, because I think some of us just found out that you actually made the documentary. So I wanted to quickly ask you about your experience making it, and what made you decide that this was a case that you wanted to focus in on yourself in terms of bringing it out to the public.
Yes, sir. And first of all, I encourage everybody to watch the documentary. It's 50 minutes long. You can find it right now on YouTube on my channel, The King Trill TV. So please take some time and check that out. And what really brought me into this, I was already doing stuff online when I had got out of prison. I wanted to stay focused, and I wanted to encourage other people to keep going forward. So I was doing some video work, and I was putting up videos about the things that are necessary for us to be focused on to stay out of prison, to remember that there are pitfalls out there that have been set up for us, and the things that we have to keep in mind so we can avoid those pitfalls. So while I was doing that, just as Two Black said, he had met Nick Grevin, who is one of the major supporters in the IDOC watch, and he approached me as well, and we spoke, and he taught me a lot because as you go through this system, especially from the inside, that you're being messed over, but and pretty much the cause, but you don't know the systematic oppression associated with it. You don't know how insidious of a monster machine that they have operating against us. And Nick was one of the first people to actually come into my life and really expose this type of information to me, And then during one of our discourses, I learned about the Pendleton 2, and you go into a situation, you say, even with guys who've been in, you say, okay, some guys started a prison riot. Okay, they got some time for it. What did you expect? type thing, you know. Even guys who've been in on the inside, we have those type of thoughts. But when I heard more about it, and when I heard the truth of the situation, and what those brothers was up against, and how they initially tried to use their positions, because they were lay advocates. They were people who talked to administration on a regular basis. They initially went to there when they heard Lokmar was being beaten and abused. They initially went to them thinking that their position would be they'd be in a position that they can communicate some type of peaceful solution to the issues that were going on. But they were met with extreme violence. And in the face of that, they desperately reacted because they themselves did not want to die. And they did not want their brother to die. What do you do? You know? So I was faced with that. I just felt the magnitude of what those brothers had to experience that day. And it really hit me and it really affected me. So I really wanted to tell their story with the most honesty that I could possibly develop to honor what they did. And that's why I'm here now, because I want to make sure these brothers everybody understands that they are not villains at all. These brothers threw their own safety and security out of the way and jumped into the fire to save someone else. You know, that's what's called a hero. And I want the world to understand that that's what these brothers are.
No, thank you for that. Queen Luce, we want to ask you too, how did you get involved in this campaign? What drove you to see this as an issue or a case that you wanted to dedicate some time to?
Well, let me start by saying hello and thank you for having me. My particular situations I thought was unique, but probably not so unique. Long story short, I got connected to IDLC Watch as suggested as a support system. I had been in a very low and depressing place with the incarceration. I've given birth to 3 males, and all of them are incarcerated right now. And just feeling vulnerable, somebody suggested that I get in touch with IDOC Watch. And as Jack said, Nick was very informative. It was through my conversations with them and the collective that I was able to look at the incarceration of my sons in a different light. So now instead of walking around depressed and, hopeless, now I got enough rage in me, to want to fight somebody. And who better than them? I believed in the mission with the other work that they're doing with the Focus Reentry Project. Just being a single mother, even I know they grown, but they still my sons. I immediately started thinking about the resources that they were going to need and some of the obstacles that they were going to face whenever they came home. And that's what drew me into the Focus Project. And just based off my own experiences, when I hear about Balagoon and Trotter's experience, the first thing my heart goes out to is their families, because they're not the only ones that's doing that time. The families are repressed and oppressed in so many different ways. And I can run down a whole list of what I myself went through. And then too, like I said, I got 3 sons incarcerated. And through my experiences with the organization, regardless of what their time tells me that they're going to come home, just because I know what I've raised in them and what has been instilled in them, they stick up for people. They're taught to have, some sympathy and empathy for their fellow man. So that could have used just out of empathy, right is right and wrong is wrong. And that's just how I raised them. It is what it is. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And the things that these brothers are going through, have gone through, and continue to go through is just a boatload of bull crap. and justice just needs to be served. You know, you just think about all the repression and oppression that we go through, and the political line that IDOC Watch presented to me just kind of put a bead on a lot of stuff that I had been walking through in life and just really couldn't articulate. It was just like they hit the nail right on the head. And that just made me hungry enough and thirsty enough for more knowledge. And the more I know, you know, the more angrier I get. So we want to do something constructive with that.
I hear that. I hear that. So obviously, you know, myself, I've been on political prisoner defense committees in my past life also as an organizer, or my past as an organizer, I should say. And I know it could be difficult in terms of coordinating with political prisoners, the activities and so forth. So have you guys had opportunities to visit them and to try to coordinate with them their campaigns for freedom?
I think, Jack, you can speak to that because you've communicated with them the most, especially for the documentary.
Definitely so. Yeah, I pretty much keep in contact with them even to this day, even after the documentary, more so with Balagoon, John Cole. And we definitely do communicate and talk about different strategies to advance this forward. Some that have to do with getting them back in court, you know, and because recently Mr. Christopher Trotter, he had filed for his clemency, which was denied. And according to my recollection, it was denied even without any reasoning or anything, you know.
Yeah,
So,
other prisoners received the exact same letter with different cases that he got. Like there was no specification.
There was no specification. So, I mean, so it would appear that it doesn't even get seen or anything, you know. So, but for the most part, these brothers are pretty much entrusting their story to us as they work from the inside, but they work with us out here. And right now, in agreement with them, we're doing everything we can to raise awareness, you know, and because there is a narrative that is strong in the communities, you know, even within the Black communities, that the Department of Corrections is within their rights to treat prisoners any way they seem deemed fit, because they portray us as dangerous assailants, you know, like these, you know, villains who can't wait to commit some type of crime. And they've pushed this narrative inside the society's mind for so long that it's taken hold. So we have to, what we're doing now is hitting these communities and really accessing and using social media better now to push that new narrative that people have been exposed to, especially in the last 10 years, that everything that authorities say is not necessarily the truth of how things happen. So with that seed already planted, this is a great time to, you know, put all our energies together and push this narrative so people can actually take a new look at this story and look at it with open eyes, because, you know, they're aware that the authorities don't always say how it goes a lot of times, especially when it has to do with us. So, you know, we're fighting from a legal perspective to get these brothers released. And we're also right now in the stage of doing major awareness, both physically in the streets, canvassing different neighborhoods, knocking on people's doors, talking to them, putting up signs and flyers and having events, passing out information, and now really pushing on social media to raise awareness and let people know that these men are being held against their will for protecting and defending themselves from the Ku Klux Klan. So are we a society that is going to sit back and allow that to go forward and side with the Ku Klux Klan? Are we going to stand up and say, hey, it's time for these men to come home. It's time for them to get some respect. You know why they did what they did, and you're going to have to acknowledge that. You're going to have to acknowledge that for what it is. They were defending themselves, you know. So we're working, those are the fronts that we're working right now.
Green, let me go to you, and Two Black, you can jump in here also. But so because you mentioned some of the day-to-day stuff that you guys are doing, what is the response you feel that you are getting from the larger community, particularly considering it's as the brother just mentioned, that our folks are primed to believe the authorities far more often than they are to believe us, even though we've had these uprisings over the last few years, which of course in our own history here, of course, has obviously gives us a dose of cynicism when it comes to having to deal with or with authorities, right? But still, we get the same propaganda everybody else gets around folks who are in prison. They must have done something, right? They should be there. So what is it like for you when you actually go out and talk to the community about these folks and when you try to present the case for why they should be free?
Presenting the case as to why they should be free, the Indianapolis chapter is handling that quite well. The cool thing about this particular defense committee is that it's on so many levels. I would say that the response is actually triggering families, members whose loved ones who are experiencing the same cruel injustice today. Yeah, we talk about Balagoon and we talk about Trotter, and yeah, we want these brothers free because they did the most humane thing possible. They stood up for another individual. The catch is what happened all those years ago is still happening today in 2022. Like, my plate is full with phone calls and text messages wanting to also share their stories about their loved ones from the same state, from the same system. I believe that it's allowing people to take a more personal look at these brothers like they're human, because they are, instead of keep waxing them over like a number, or that term out of sight, out of mind type deal. They're not out of the sight and out of the mind of their loved ones. Every day that they stay in there, knowing that they, supposed to have been home decades. We ain't talking a few years. We're talking about decades ago. I'm so mushy. I'm just saying that from a mother's point of view, that's enough to get anybody riled up. That's the response. It's making people be like, hey, you know what? That's still going on. My son, my nephew, my baby daddy, my husband, my wife, they have the same stories, just different faces, but the same demon.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think as far as some of the response, like you said, Kamau, it's complicated because a lot of us are unfortunately fall for the propaganda. But I will say, a lot of people, when they hear the story, are pretty responsive. It's just getting them to that next step. That's the real challenge. Like, I haven't really confronted anyone who's heard us out, and I'm sure all of us can speak to that, who's heard the story and just shrugs it off. If you get them to that point, they'll hear you. They're like, man, that's terrible, right? But getting them to show up to the events, getting them to join the committee, getting them to engage in further action, that's been challenging. And then there's also just a more structural challenge right now. There's been a lot, particularly I can speak for Indianapolis. There's just been a lot of money poured into what I call like this kind of escapist black joy, where people are just want to just turn up or whatever, and there's not a lot of money that's been poured into things like this that actually deal with the reality of what we're going through. So it's been a challenge to try to promote in the midst of that environment. But that's just part of the struggle. But we still have had some positive. I mean, we were in the newspaper. We were in 2 newspapers just last week. Jock was on with three different news stations locally. We're on here right now. So there's been a good response. But like I would tell anyone who wants to do this, it's a protracted struggle. And if you think that you're going to just learn about the story and then tell somebody and then they're going to get out tomorrow, it's just not going to be like that. Like, people have, in all fairness, people have other things going on in their lives. People have other things that they're dealing with. People got, all kinds of stuff, right? So trying to connect this not just to their case specifically, but like Queen's talking about, like just that there are many families that are dealing with this. Like everyone on this panel is connected. I had a brother who was locked up for several years, so I know how that works, and trying to like bridge that gap between this is still going and this happened to them. I think that's one of our bigger challenges that we're still working through.
Jack, I'm coming to you and add on to to that, because that, I mean, I think something too Black said is really deep about, organizing while you're doing other things in your life, right? Or organizing while other people are trying to do things in their life. And again, as somebody who's had some experiences working on cases of political prisoners, one of the most difficult things or disappointing things for them sometimes is when you can't meet all their needs, right? Because they're inside, they're looking for a support system, and you try to do the best that you can. But, how does that play into sort of like the work that you guys do? I know this work can be very hard. And part of the rewarding part, of course, is getting to talk to these folks and connecting with them and hearing their stories. So how do you get through trying to do this work and keep that balance of doing other things that you got going on in your life?
Well, the fortunate thing for me is that, I actually work for Focus Initiatives, a non-for-profit. So I actually do this and am able to pay my bills. So, that's at least 8 hours a day that I can dedicate, to advancing this story and getting this message to the people. So I'm in a uniquely, because most people, that are associated with this aren't in that position. They do have daytime jobs. Even I did before I got signed on, and I was able to put much more vision and much more effort and much more energy into these projects, But when it comes to assisting these brothers and communicating with these brothers, when they talk to me, I really feel the obligation to have to be a strong advocate for them. So for me, it was really huge to actually deal directly with these men, because I know the character of these guys, and I will always attest to that. They have always been very uplifting. It's just amazing. And it baffles me that you can be in the hole for literally decades, 10, 20, 30 years. But when I speak to you and you have nothing but positivity and you have nothing but good things to say from the pit of your gut, and that you are encouraging other people, you're encouraging me to have a good day. And I get to go where I want to go. But I know when you take a shower today, you're going to be cuffed up, moving to a steel box, So it's just amazing to me. And that really is what has really propelled me and really pushed me forward. And it's even forming me and making me even more focused, even now as I speak, because these men that I know personally are too good to not have somebody show the same level of care and concern that they showed to another brother on that fated day. Yeah.
So let me ask Queen and Two Black this question. What has been the reaction of the authorities? Like you talked about the parole board, which is, usually their thing is that they're going to hit you like for the 2 years or whatever the hit is. And they give you like that general letter they give everybody when they hit you. But what has been the response, like the prosecutor or DA's office, the mayor's office? What's been a response of, you mentioned there were 2 articles in the media. What's been a response of the media when you guys present the facts to them about this case and the fact that these folks have been locked up for something that was heroic as opposed to criminal?
I mean, there's levels to that, right? So another thing when you're doing this organizing is we always have to remember that there's backlash that often will not just happen to us, but more so will happen to the prisoners themselves, right? So as you raise awareness, you asked the question earlier, Kamau, like when we dialogue with them, that's one of the things you have to get their consent, because they have to be willing to understand. They have to be willing to take on the sacrifice again that by raising awareness on this, there might be retaliation from the guards from the state overall, and that was something that we actually did discuss earlier on in this campaign. So they were willing to move forward, knowing that. Now, as far as it, since we haven't been doing this campaign long, I haven't heard it. Only one time we did hear that the prison did get wind of this campaign, and nothing to my knowledge violent happened. But more than often, they're just going to try to not act like it. They're going to just try not to acknowledge it. That's why you have to raise awareness, and you have to make it so loud where they have to respond. Otherwise, they're going to act like it never happened. As far as what's happened to them, even prior to this campaign, something I didn't get to say because I was rushing through the opening story, because there's just a lot of details that we could literally just spend this whole time talking about the case itself, honestly. But Trotter, or Naeem Trotter, actually was able to get his sentence vacated back in 2018 because on the grounds that the state didn't take into consideration the mitigating circumstances, which is to say, like I said earlier, they didn't consider the fact that they were trying to save a life and that it was self-defense. Like, the state literally just pushed all that evidence out. So he was able to get his sentence vacated, which again was 142 years. But then they removed the judge who vacated his sentence, put a new judge in. This is in Madison County, Indiana, for those who want to know the location. They removed the judge, put a new judge in, and then resentenced him to 122 years, right? And again, y'all can Queen know the direct quote, but the judge said something. Y'all can clean it up. But
Right,
Judge, what was the quote?
Yeah, the judge, the exact quote was, "I had to have my guards back." The judge said that in open court. You know, even after being privy to the private information of these guards being directly connected to the Ku Klux Klan. I can't say that enough. This isn't accusations or allegations. There's documented evidence.
This isn't a deposition from a guard right. That worked there. A guard that actually was stabbed in the uprising testified to this. Michael Richardson is his name.
Yeah, Michael Richardson said that he was, he said he named different members and their different rankings within the Department of Corrections as far as their, whether lieutenant, captain, whatever, and it was from the bottom to the top. It wasn't like 4 or 5 guys who were just regular guards who worked here. These was decorated, these were members of the Department of Corrections who've been working there for years and years with top positions, who was carrying these things out. And these men had approached this guard personally and said, "Hey, we're the Sons of Light. You need to get down with us, and this is what we do, and this is how things are done here." And the guy got scared for his life, and he went and reported this to, he said, the FBI and to his higher ups at the administration, at the institution, and he was turned away all the time. He was turned away. We're going to check. We're going to see about it. And nothing was ever done. And this was up to 2 years before the uprising took place in '85. These are all things that could have been prevented. Yeah. So it's all documented.
Queen, part of your bio talks about the fact that your sons, you've had sons who are doing time. And so, this feels particularly personal, as Two Black mentioned. It could be personal to all of us who've had family members or friends who've been locked down. But for you to have all of your sons, or 3 of your sons, to have experienced incarceration, and for you still to be able to work on the cases of some other folks who've also been incarcerated, that takes a lot of strength and character. So what you talked a little bit about how you got involved, but what keeps you going? Knowing that, again, something that folks have mentioned, that the authorities in general society is up against it to try to keep these folks in prison. So what keeps you going in terms of the struggle?
All the phone calls, baby. Just because of my unique situation, there's not a phone call I don't answer if I hear it. And a lot of times I don't know what's on the other end of that telephone line. And there have been a few times where mom or girlfriend was so distraught that they actually needed that lending ear. What keeps me going is the fact that I'm able to delegate. There are times where I tend to absorb other people's energy and I have to step back. But then there's a comrade that I can call and be like, hey, I don't have enough spoons to do this today. Can you make this phone call, try to make a connection? I think what keeps me going is the fact that I wouldn't say enough of us, but it's enough of us to not drop the ball. I'm not always the one carrying the baton. That helps. And that's the kind of network that we utilize through IDOC Watch and Green Star Families.
So my last question in this part of the discussion, and then we're going to switch to audience questions mixed in with some more that I'll have, is how can individuals and organizations aid in your efforts? How can they find you guys to support?
Which we've been posting, and someone please post it again. The very first thing you can do is just fill out the form. What that does is immediately send a letter to the governor and to the prosecutor. So that's the first thing you can do. You don't have to live in Indiana to do that. So anyone and everybody that's listening, that would be great. You don't even have to write the letter. You literally just put your name in, email, it gets put on the letter, and then we'll send it out stamped and all of that. So we'll take care of most of it. We just need you to put your name down. So it's basically just like signing a petition. So it's very easy to do. The more we can do, the more we can get, the better. Again, we were talking earlier about, there could be some kind of reprisal or retaliation. The more that they know, that they as in the state of Indiana, in this case, IDOC, the more that they know that there's advocacy, the less likely they are to retaliate because they understand that will get reported. So the more signatures coming in, the more people who advocate, and this isn't just for political prisoners, this is for prisoners, period, because I've went through this again on a personal level. The more advocacy that you do, the more protection that's going to provide for them. It's not a guaranteed foolproof thing, but it does provide protection. So that's the first thing you can do. You can click on the link tree to learn more about the story. If you are over any kind of programming or institution, we're down to hold screenings for the documentary that we've done. We're also working on a comic book layout. Jock is very talented, so he's doing that as well. But we're working on the comic book layout of the story that I told at the beginning of what happened, so we can share that. So if you have any kind of art events and you want to share that, that's something we can do in the near future. If you go to the link tree, I think this is one last thing. You can write the prisoners directly, and I always advocate for that because that's another way of showing support. And if you in there, it's nice to just have people to talk to from the outside. Period. So just writing them, and in your area, if you're trying to support any other political prisoners, I would advise to have like letter writing sessions where you just have people come together and write letters for them. So I think I covered the bases. If I didn't, y'all can clean it up. But those are some of the things you can do.
Yeah, no, I just want to. Oh, go ahead, Jock.
I just wanted to add once again that I really encourage everyone listening to go to YouTube, the King Trill TV, and you'll see it right there. The Pendleton 2, they stood up, and please give a look. So you can see the type of things that these men and women go through in the system that's been set up to look like some type of rehabilitative thing, but it's nothing of the sort.
And really quickly, I wanted to highlight something that Two Black said, which is completely correct. This is a former practicing attorney. There's nothing like shining a light on the practices of these folks in prison to get a little bit of justice, just a little bit, just to get, like y'all said, it maybe that's one time that they won't mess with them because they know that people are watching and people are caring about what's happening for them on the outside. And so that's really important, not only for the the mental state of the prisoners themselves who are dealing with everything, but it's important just for their security and their protection. So I want to switch. We got 4 questions from the audience. I want to ask you guys, anybody can jump in and answer. One is from a fan favorite, Franny French. And she asks, can you talk about what receiving personal letters means to political prisoners? So can you talk about what you know from the side of the political prisoners receiving letters from people who are concerned about them? How does that help them or help them in their support?
I'll take that one.
Mhm.
The direct quote from my son is, for somebody to take the time out of their 24 hours and take maybe 5 minutes and let them know that you're thinking about them. The fact that you're sitting down to write that letter to send directly to them, that's enough to carry me for a while. That's what he told me. They feel separated from everybody. They don't know what's going on. You know what I'm saying? The fact that somebody on the outside, quote, the outside is willing to sit down and communicate them, that kind of takes away some of that feeling of isolation, the feeling of being thrown away, and the feeling of not being cared for. They're human.
Does anybody else want to add on real quick?
I mean, honestly, I think that resolves it. I think she said it best. Yeah.
I agree. So the next question we have, this is a broader question about the fight or support for political prisoners. I think it's something that we all encounter when we talk about either the prison industrial complex, when we talk about the police arresting our people. Well, we don't all encounter it the way this one is asked. But this is really a question around prison abolition in some ways. But does supporting political prisoners mean we should not support incarceration even for fascist enemies? Two Black, I'm gonna ask you to jump off on that one.
I imagine they're talking about cops. I'm just gonna assume are cops, or
I think they're talking about cops, and they could be talking about politicians who are right wingers, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an abolitionist struggle. I think. I mean, personally, I always say this: I'm not going to make it my main job to go out and advocate to send anyone to prison. But excuse my French, I don't give a fuck if they go to prison. You know, like I'm not one of those people that feel like when Derek Chauvin gets put in prison that's an important moment to highlight abolition and why we shouldn't advocate for long sentences. I don't take that line. I just don't really understand the logic. Honestly, I think that if we're thinking about this in a bigger, colonial sense, and when we're talking about the idea of revolution, once you've done the revolution, then that's the fair conversation of what to do with people like that. But as we're currently under the actual struggle, and as we're currently under the boot of the enemy, if any of them get knocked off, I don't really think that's a problem. I think that's a good thing. That doesn't fix the system in a sense. So no, putting a cop in prison doesn't end police brutality or abolish the police or community control. None of that's going to happen. But I don't really feel that that's where we should focus our energy, is by advocating for cops or any of the people that are constantly, oppressing us. I just don't understand. I'm not trying to get into a debate here. I want to keep this on the case, but I don't really agree with that kind of advocacy. So again, you're not going to see me on social media. I'm just not going to say anything. Darren Chauvin gets 30 years. Good for him. Life moves on. I don't feel there's any need to make an abolitionist point in that moment.
Now, I'm going to move on to the next question, but I just want to say I love when the interpreter has to say a cuss word. So just like that, just let y'all know. So this is a personal question for Queen. I think because we mentioned a couple of times about your sons, as much as you're willing to tell us, like, how are they doing in terms of their own particular battles?
Okay, so I have 2 in the state. I talk to one of them maybe once every 2 weeks. I talk to one, that's the one that's been labeled as the mama's boy. We got to keep money on the phone because he talks to me every day. I have one that is in the Fed system. They have shipped my son all the way to freaking California. I have not heard from him in over a month. The two that I hear from, I do a lot of what's the word? Pep talk to them as needed. So as far as I know, what they're sharing with me, they're moving right along. But I have one that I have absolutely no idea what's going on with him. And they moved him away so far that I'm actually saving right now to get over there and at least look at my son. So that's where I am with that. And in the meantime, I am here helping raise their 4 sons. Collectively, they have 4 sons.
I hear you, sis. I hear you. Another question we have here is, I'm gonna shorten this one, but this is actually no, I'm gonna ask this question first. Actually, right here we have a question about how do you organize a letter writing campaign or letter writing community event centered around political prisoners? What factors are necessary? So I don't know if anybody wants to take that. Basically, how do you organize a letter writing campaign for prisoners / political prisoners?
If I could just address what what Queen was saying just a second ago, of what she's suffering through with your children being moved like chess pieces all across the country, and fighting to pay these crazy bills to communicate, just to have a 10-15 minute conversation. It takes so much. It affects her so deeply, and it's so hard on a family. And she also went on to say that she had collectively their 4 children that she's also taking care of and doing the best that she can to help them out in every situation they face. This is why this type of work is of the utmost importance. This is why we cannot fail, because these systems that are already firmly established and working in place, these systems have plans for our young people. I didn't know that as a younger man, as I went through the system and discovered that the plans that they had laid out for me. But these systems have plans against our young people that they want to carry out against them. If we do not raise this awareness, then they're going to be plotting on the next generation of youth of color. If we keep passing the buck, if we keep turning a blind eye and say, okay, well, it's not me, it's not affecting me directly, it's not hitting me directly, that's where you're sadly mistaken, because it's going to affect you. When multiple families are broken down, it's going to affect the whole entire community, because different ideas get to set in. Levels of oppression, levels of poverty, levels of suffering gets multiplied and compounded, and it just continues on. And then now you have a certain mentality because of these conditions that's primed to fall into a trap of some sort and setting, because of the way this community has been systematically designed to operate. We are the community organizers. We are the ones who know this full well. It has now become our obligation to let this message be known and let this message be spread, so we can have the opportunity to stop what is being done and ravage through our communities. It's up to us. There will be no one else to do it. It is up to the community organizers. So everybody who hears us and hears what we're doing, understand whether you act or whether you do nothing, it still is your responsibility to act in some way. Because I guarantee you, This ugly beast of a monster that grows every day will come knocking on your door. And in that day, I just pray you're ready to deal with them because they're coming. I just
That's
had
right.
to address that issue.
No. That's good. That's good. Really quick, I'm gonna ask Queen if you're up for it. If you want to drop your email, obviously I don't want to take the attention off the Pendleton too, but I think people have been moved by your individual story, and there's been some offers to support in some ways. So if you want to drop your email in the chat, so if folks want to contact you personally, then please do. If you think that's something that you want, so please do that to take the time. Two Black, I'm gonna go back to you really quick to just talk about that question, that sort of technical organizing question on what's involved with organizing a letter writing campaign for prisoners.
Well, I mean, one, you got to have their actual addresses. I mean, let's just on a very simple level, like you need to have their addresses so you can send the letters out. You need to have, I mean, we run into this issue even with the letters that we have to the governor and the prosecutor. Like we just talked about, we need to print them out and photocopy all the letters that people sign before we send them out, so we keep evidence so the state can't say that it didn't happen. So same thing for mailing out. You should keep a copy of whatever you send out because the prison might lose the letter. I mean, I've went through this personally. You send something to a prison, it doesn't make it there. So I would say keep a copy of it. As far as just the organizing campaign, I think that first you have to have enough awareness so people will show up to an event whatsoever. Once you have that figured out, and this is what we're working towards now. Is like once you have that figured out, then you can brain. I mean, there's different ways you can do it. You can brainstorm. You can have a kind of like we do a writer's sessions. You can have that, or you can just have people show up with their letters already written. I would say use this as an opportunity to not just write letters, but to raise awareness on the campaign. Maybe do some political education with it. But I would say again, I guess the kind of baselines, you need to have people show up. You need to have the addresses. You need to make sure you know where you're going to mail everything. Have people sign up the letters. Have all the materials ready. If people want to write the letters themselves on the spot, have the paper, have the pen, like just very basic stuff. And I think that you could get that done.
Right on, right on. So someone asked the question, this is a broader question also, but it has to do with sort of the struggle for not just political prisoners, but the larger struggle that usually has led to the fact that we even have political prisoners, particularly when we talk about the Black Power era. But so someone asked in the chat that they just read on Instagram from a prison activist page about the Pontiac Rebellion from 1978. The Pontiac 16 members of various Chicago gangs were put on death row, but were eventually all taken off death row. Students from various universities and activists fought for them. Was just wondering about the students nowadays. Is there still a revolutionary student movement? And so within that, I would ask you guys, have you tried to focus in on campuses as a way to get students who are active or have organizing interests to be involved in helping to support this case?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes, it's funny that you mentioned that because actually that is how I started even engaging and learning about this case, because I was added to a speaking series that had to do with colleges, speaking in college settings and talking to different students and their college groups, and one in particular was some law students. And I was very surprised and very encouraged when I saw how many young people came out to take in this information. I was very, very pleased to see that. And not only to see so many people in attendance, but to see their level of participation and interaction when it came to learning about the story and engaging with us. And then even after our communication, after the whole thing was winding up and I'm leaving, I got several different students talking to me and asking questions about this and about my perspectives and really good, piercing questions. So, I really do think that we are in a very, very good time because You know, as I said earlier, we got so many people who now understand that everything that we have been taught to accept as true, now we know for a fact we have to question it. And then the other side of that is now there are so many young people who are actively asking the right questions. Why has this been happening for so long? What's stopping us from advancing this narrative in a stronger way? Who's actually the people that are standing against this type of thing? I mean, you know, I'm really impressed by that level of effort and curiosity and pointedness that they're applying. And I'm encouraged by it. So right now, I just say again that we're in a pretty good position to move this entire narrative of the Pendleton Two, John Cole and Christopher Trotter, in particularly, but also just raising awareness of what we are up against when dealing with this criminal justice system that constantly tends to prey on people of color and extreme poverty.
I'd like to also add that um, I've been introduced to some abolitionist social work, and one has basically declared herself my right-hand man. um, so as far as the exposure to different colleges and things, that's one of the things that IDOC Watch has definitely been investigating and pursuing, just because we know that they know that there's willing and ready students out there that can help us take up this cause.
No, I see in the chat too, people have been talking about some guidelines around writing letters. And so there's been some further information dropped in the chat. And again, people should always remember a couple of things. One is that the prison opens up mail. And so that mail can be and a lot of times is read by prison authorities. So take that with a note of what it is that you write when you write to prisoners, and be very careful not to ask people about their specific cases in terms of asking them to write out details of their cases. A lot of these people have appeals pending. They have other legal matters that are pending. Your role as someone who's supporting them is not to get all the facts that you can from them directly, because again, that can become evidence of one misstatement, one misunderstanding about what someone is saying. Again, particularly since prison authorities are allowed to read letters, can do great problems or pain to someone's ongoing case. So as we start to wrap up, I want to give everybody an opportunity for any closing remarks about what they think we either haven't covered or haven't said about the Pendleton 2 that they think is extremely important for our audience to hear in order for them to understand who these folks are, what this case is about. So we can start with anybody. If Queen, you want to go, and maybe we'll just go down the opposite way. Queen, John, Jock, I'm sorry, and then Two Black.
I'm gonna leave you with the thought that the Pendleton 2 are human beings. They're heroes. They saved the life of another. And even though they were in a position to take the life of the very people who had been mistreating them all the way up until the rebellion, they still decent human beings. They didn't use that time to retaliate or get even, and they're not even sorry they did it.
Yeah, it's just I just encourage everybody once again to go to my YouTube page, the King Trill TV, and please watch the Pendleton 2, because ultimately it is a truly amazing story about these brothers who were willing to risk sacrificing their lives in the name of humanity. And just as Queen brought out, once they were undergoing this and fighting off these attackers, once they had established the upper hand, they could have easily, even in that anger or wrath of the moment of being in battle, they could have easily killed these men. They had the upper hand. They had took the cell house over. They could, but they did the exact opposite. They protected them. in the heat of the moment, in the heat of battle. So that just gets to tell you about the state of mind of individuals. That means that they never wanted that. Because if that's what I had wanted, that could have easily been accomplished, easily been done. So that's not something they wanted. You know, they just didn't want to see a good man die. You know, so this story needs to be brought to light because we rarely hear stories to this level of human denial to uplift and save and protect someone else. Like Christopher Trotter, he only had 4 months left to get out of it. He was only there for petty theft. They put him, and then they put him behind the wall in one of the most dangerous prisons in the country, not because of a criminal record. He didn't have one, and he was only in there for petty theft. They put him in there because of his military training, and the judge said, "Oh, you're a violent individual because of what we taught you." You know, even though his charge had nothing to do with violence. So even from the beginning, he should have never been placed in there. There's so many discrepancies and different things that have been done disrespectfully to these men and to people of color in general. It's time that we address them as a community. We can no longer address these things one person at a time. Oh, now it's my issue, I'ma talk. Oh, now it's my issue, I'ma talk. It's time for us to unite each other and have that community that has been established in the Black community for, you know, since the beginning. We've always loved each other since the beginning. It's time for us to get back to that and reconnect and reunite and stand together so these abuses won't continue and we won't continue to be looked upon as prey. So that's what has to happen. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I got to get these brothers' story out.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to let Two Black and then we're going to let Tone actually have the last word. So go ahead, Brother Two Black.
I mean, I think my colleagues summarized it up pretty well. I don't have much more to say. I think I did something that Jock did in the documentary. When you watch it, he starts with the George Floyd, not the protest particularly, but the actual murder itself, and how there's a bunch of people standing there filming it, watching it, but no one actually jumps in, and not as a condemnation of people, like as a moral condemnation, but he juxtaposes that with in the prison where they witnessed someone being beat up and they did jump in. So there's a lot of things to learn from that in the sense of if they can do that with 3 months left and you can go home and 3.5 years left, then why is that something that doesn't cross our minds, or not even, I'm sure it crosses our minds, but something we don't act upon? And that's a challenge that everyone, including myself, again, I'm not saying this as some, reactionary, like y'all need to turn up. I'm just saying, like, that's ultimately a question we need to ask ourselves. Why sit there and watch that? And this is a reason why this is why political prisoners are made examples of, because when you can snap people out of that sense of, oh, I don't have to just watch, I can actually get in the action, I can actually save someone's life, I can actually rise up against the state. When you can enkindle that kind of spirit amongst the people, like, that has to always be crushed, because the moment that catches fire, it's a wrap. You know what I mean? Like, it's a wrap. If people feel like, oh, we're not going to just watch you step on a man's neck, we're going to, as Deruba Ben Wahad said, we're going to at least throw a brick at you or a shoe or something. And I know, Kamau, y'all do trainings where you create distractions or you surround the police cars, with community movement builders. We're going to do something as opposed to just watch it happen or just film it so we can just have a conversation about someone's murder later and everybody can get paid off of that. But we're actually going to try to save this person's life. Like, that's important. So I think Jock does a great job of, like, setting up that juxtaposition, because they were willing to make that sacrifice. And one last point about why that happened, I mentioned briefly about the Black Dragons. That was part of an organization that they had built inside Pendleton, or the Indiana Reformatory at the time, that brought prisoners together and said, we have one enemy. In this case, it's the prison itself. It's the guards who, like we've noted, are part of the KKK, a splinter group. And we're not going to fight amongst each other, all the different gangs, all the different stuff. We're not going to fight amongst each other. So when that moment came, they had already been organizing So it was no question about what to do because they had already been doing it. It wasn't this, it was spontaneous in the sense that it wasn't planned, but it wasn't spontaneous in the sense that they didn't already have that inside them. They weren't already working towards that level of consciousness. This is something they were already doing. So if we're already organizing on the outside with that same understanding, it's not about just individually throwing the brick, but we should be organized to understand that's what you do when someone's neck is getting stepped on, really by anyone, but particularly by a cop. That's what you do, right? So it's like that's just a lesson to learn from this. That's what I was trying to say. Like, this isn't just about the case itself, but it's like there are lessons that we can all glean from this to help our struggles, worldwide.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Tone, if you're still with us, we want to let you have the final word on this particular topic of political prisoners for tonight. And Tone may not be able to join us right now, so I just want to say thank you to the panel again for bringing out an issue that, particularly a case that, again, the larger community that works on the issue of political prisoners does not always know about or does not always represent for. So I think it's important that we understand that not only do we have political prisoners who have overtly fought a war of liberation for our people, but we also have folks in our community who have fought the right fight and still need our support and our organizing help. So we want to make sure that folks know that. I want to turn it over to Balagoon, I believe, to bring us out. And so I want to thank you guys for joining the panel.
Thank you all. Just a couple of reminders and announcements before we close. So as mentioned many times over the course of the program, send a letter to the Pendleton 2. It takes just a couple seconds. I did at the start of the call. The links that Tone mentioned, which I'm dropping in the chat right now. Oh, somebody already dropped it in the chat. Thank you. To check out upcoming Black August events on the Black Alliance for Peace website. And we also post our events throughout the year on there. And so be sure to check that out whenever y'all get a chance. And that pretty much concludes our program for this evening. We'd like to thank the hosts, Kamau, the panelists, and the interpreters for their time. This was a powerful, moving webinar. That said, thank you all for your time. And as we like to say here at the Black Alliance for Peace, no compromise, no retreat.